The Wright brothers didn't contemplate the staying on the ground of things. Alexander Graham Bell didn't contemplate the non-communication of things. Thomas Edison didn't contemplate the darkness of things. In order to float an idea into your reality, you must be willing to do a somersault into the inconceivable and land on your feet, contemplating what you want instead of what you don't have. This quote by Dr. Wayne W. Dyer points out three iconic figures in human history. They have brought us inventions such as the airplane, the telephone, and the light bulb. And now for us, these inventions may seem commonplace, but at the time that these inventions were merely ideas, they were heavily ridiculed, being deemed as impossible tasks. And although today we know that such inventions are possible to create, what kept these great innovators pushing towards their goal in the face of adversity? Belief. These inventors refused to be trapped by dogma or living with the results of other people's thinking. These men were examples that belief can change your world. Belief has moved continents, it has moved countries, and it will carry the FEC through another seemingly impossible task, as it has done time and time again. My name is Andrew Reed, and these are my colleagues, Ethan McCollough, Matt Nolte, and Grant Taylor. We'd like to thank the FEC board members once again for reaching out to us at the Haslam College of Business and considering our proposal to improve the profitability of FEC's transportation network and seize future growth opportunities. To begin, the FEC has been poised with an opportunity to seize transportation demand between Central and South Florida. Before making this decision, however, it is important to consider the competitive intensity of this market. So to demonstrate this, we've chose to use the Porter's Five Forces analysis. So to start, looking at the threat of new entrants, our firm finds this threat as a low threat, and this is due to barriers such as a high capital investment with a low investment return rate. Additionally, your company already has a pre-established infrastructure in the state of Florida, also reducing this threat. Moving on to the threat of substitutes. Currently, we also see this as not a threat either, and this is due to the fact that the trend in intermodal transportation is growing, and this has been happening largely because of the high variability in fuel prices, as well as the ability to achieve greater economies of scale. Next, looking at the bargaining power. When looking at the level of bargaining power between the buyer and the supplier, this is largely determined by the relationship that exists between cost and service. And to explain that further, for an example, a customer would have a high level of bargaining power if he had many options to choose from in transportation, but in an environment where it is like a low fuel cost. On the other hand, considering the supplier's bargaining power, the supplier would have higher bargaining power if either fuel prices are high or steep service requirements limit the customer's ability to choose different freight options. And lastly, looking at our analysis of current industry rivalry, we've determined that it is largely based on the number of competitors and their capabilities within service. So from our market analysis, we have concluded that based on your company's strong presence in the state of Florida, as well as its core competencies in intermodal transportation, it will allow for effective market penetration. Secondly, given that your company owns its own private fleet of trucks as well as its own rail, your company will have a large competitive advantage through service capability. Third, given that the FEC can compete strongly on cost, your company will be able to maintain market share even in events where fuel prices fluctuate. And fourth, to address a question posed by the FEC board on the shipper's perspective, customers will heavily consider cost, lead time, and service reliability. Additionally, these customers will differentiate themselves on route selections based on their strategic goals stemming from their product characteristics. For example, a customer that is looking to ship a low-margin product, such as crushed rock, will likely choose a mode of transportation that will minimize total transportation costs given the low value of the product itself. So, moving on to more of the strategic issues facing the Florida transportation network. From the customer's perspective, given the characteristics of the population in Florida, the economy is heavily consumer-based. Because of this, there are significantly more inbound shipments to Florida than outbound shipments from Florida. The majority of transportation flows from the northern tip of Florida to the southern tip of Florida. This imbalance in north-south flow has made other options of transportation more costly. Additionally, according to a white paper commissioned by the FEC on intermodal transportation, this freight imbalance in Florida has also caused increased highway congestion. Now, looking at how this strategic issue affects your company, this impacts your company because you have a heavy reliance on intermodal volume. This is supported not only through its significant profitability, but it also through the fact that it represented 76% of total annual revenue movements in 2014. Given this economic imbalance, there must be more consideration given to this open market opportunity and the strategies used to be successful in there. But the real question is, what is FEC doing currently in the Central Florida area, and what steps will it take moving forward?
And I've got just the answer for you. In addition to FEC's current relationships with the major players in the intermodal industry domestically, and your lively business in ocean-going freight that traverses the southern ports of Florida, FEC only has a small market share in the freight movement industry serving the Central Florida region. I'd like to now refer you to Table 1, which outlines the 8 current routing options that exist in the market. Now, these 8 options can be broken down into 2 basic categories. Routes 1 through 4 that are served by rail first from the port and consolidated in the Jacksonville region with a direct trucking afterwards to the final destination in Central Florida. And routes 5 through 8, which are served from a direct trucking option straight from the port of origin to the final destination, again in Central Florida. Now, you at FEC have recognized a hole in the market and capitalized on the expensive empty miles that truckers have to take after serving the Central Florida market going back north with your ramp-to-door product. With this in mind, and the fact that you have shown that this can be a financially viable business opportunity, our recommendation is direct freight movement and further penetration into serving the Central Florida opportunity, only this time from the southern ports of Florida, where you have 2 intermodal facilities in the Port of Miami as well as Port Everglades. And this will now be the lowest cost option in the market. It also, with being the lowest cost option, does add a few days of lead time, or a little time of lead time, but we are confident after analyzing inventory carrying costs and your historic performance and very high reliability that you will be able to attract new customers and add ports of call for the Port of Miami and Port Everglades. Now, this direct freight movement proposition is outlined by routes 11 through 14, again on Table 1. We pair this recommendation with the secondary recommendation of a marketing campaign to let potential customers know of this new lowest cost offering in the market. Now, with it being the lowest cost, it is sensitive to a few market fluctuations that we will unbox in a moment. But how will this route adjust the diagram that we just saw a moment ago? Routes 1 through 8 will remain unchanged. Only now, freight coming in through the ports of Miami and Port Everglades will have a second option. Instead of only trucking directly to the final destination, customers will be able to leverage your capabilities of cost savings in rail and get their freight to the Central Florida region more cheaply. And as I've stated, this cost savings is sensitive to a few fluctuations in the market, such as inventory carrying costs and container value, as well as fuel price. And we have done further analysis in this area. Now, since we are competing on cost, we found it beneficial to analyze our cost savings proposition. This is relative to, you can see the top table here as Route 6, our current cost competitor, second cheapest option in the market. And there's, in Table 2, further analyzation of this fuel sensitivity. In the bottom table, you can see in the current column our current cost savings that we extend to the customer and how it is affected by changes in the fuel prices in the columns to the left and right, with a 50% decrease, a 50% increase, and a $1 increase in the fuel price. The trend to take away here is that as fuel prices increase, our cost opportunity, our cost savings opportunity to the customer increases as well. And this is only relative to the second cheapest option available. But what about all those other options we saw earlier in the diagram?
When we compare to that Savannah route, we see that we are only increasing their cost savings by a small proportion of what's potentially available. When we compare our route's cost to our highest cost competitor, a route that lands in the Port of Houston and is trucked over 950 miles to its final destination in Orlando, we see that significant cost reduction can be realized for your customers, and your company has the potential to capture almost all of the market share from these high-priced competitors. Competitors such as these incur high rates and are very susceptible to changes in fuel prices, with a fuel surcharge of almost $700 at current prices. So, when we compare these to the two potential options that your company proposed, transloading and direct movement, we can see that with transloading, you still realize a significant cost advantage, but not quite as much as our recommendation of direct movement. Here in transloading, you're limited to one port of call, the port of Miami. From there, it's shuttled over to Hialeah ramp, where each 40-foot ISO container is unboxed and moved into a 53-foot domestic container. There, it's loaded on to your rail facilities, which are taken up to Cocoa Beach, incurring a 45-minute delay to release that block from the rest of the train, then truck it over to its final destination in Orlando. These additional handling charges that transloading incurs at over $270 per 40-foot container that you transport, as well as additional lead time for the handling of those goods, increasing your inventory carrying costs along this route. So, when you compare that to our recommendation of direct movement to Orlando from your facilities in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, you realize instant flexibility by now having the option to transfer shipments from both ports of call and capture potentially more customer demand. This gives your supply chain more flexibility and your customers more options. There, you don't have to deal with the costly shuttle or handling fees to transload the goods, and can simply rail them up to your facility at Cocoa Beach, where they incur a similar 45-minute delay before going on by truck in a chassis to their final destination in Orlando. On the right, you can see that we've compared the relative costs of both of these proposals, and note that transloading has a higher lead time due to that aforementioned handling time, and a higher total landed cost due to the increase in in-transit inventory carrying costs for your customers and the handling charges for transloading and the shuttle. But how does this option and our recommendation compare when you look at the potential investment required by your firm? If you'll turn to Table 3, you can see that we've projected cash flows for this investment over the next 15 years, taking into account your initial investment in the facility, your investment in a container yard, and the tractor trailers required for this investment. And we have come up with a net present value of over $1.5 million that can be realized by your company. This uses an internal or a required rate of return of 8%. This also increases your average revenue per intermodal unit over $15 from the previous year, when you had only $450 of revenue per unit, and gives you an average contribution per unit of almost $70. You can see that this option is better than transloading because it allows you to capture a greater market share by offering more cost savings to your customers, and it's better than doing nothing because your internal rate of return is 12%, greater than your barrier rate of 8% for the required rate of return for this kind of project. So, what kind of strategies can you also implement to ensure the success of this kind of project?
We are confident that pursuing the Central Florida opportunity, as well as taking full advantage of the untapped Orlando market, will be the best course of action. And provide the most desirable results for you and for your customers. This direct freight movement plan, combined with the promising opportunities of the future, will prove to be the best allocation of your resources, such as your time, your money, and your efforts. So, although we are confident that we have developed an effective and efficient recommendation, we still recognize that every strategy has risks associated with it. And so that being said, we'd like to walk you through some of those risks and how we plan to best mitigate those. First, we have the risk of fuel prices. Fuel prices are obviously inherently unstable, and so due to their unpredictable nature, we do see them as a risk for your company. However, this can be offset due to the cost structure of your railroad and the efficiencies you gain through that, as well as your new acquisition that's coming of liquefied natural gas trains. Next, we have the risk of hurricanes. As you'll see in the chart depicted on the right, we've highlighted the 6 most active months of hurricane season. During this time, we recommend to mitigate this risk that you keep a close monitoring on inclement weather and that you keep close-knit relationships with your customers so if needed, you can cancel routes if necessary. And finally, we have the risk of low volume. This risk runs true if the possibility happens that your FEC's new route is underutilized. Now, we do see this risk being highly mitigated through the macro environment. For example, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, as of 2014, just last year, Florida has passed New York as the 3rd most populous state in the country. That being said, with the high density population of Florida, as well as some of the issues that have been taking place on the West Coast with the labor strikes in the LA ports, we see this driving demand east furthermore and mitigating that risk of low volume. So now that we've walked you through some of the basic risks associated, we'd like to revisit and make clear the benefits associated with our recommendation and how those far outweigh these risks. First, the benefit of low cost. This is the primary benefit of our recommendation. You will be the most cost competitive among all your competitors and the most cost effective, saving you and your customers a great deal of money. Second, the benefit of asset utilization. By utilizing your route that is already in place, and by putting more loads on your trains and adding that additional 45-minute stop in Cocoa Beach, rather than completely restructuring an entire new rail route, you will be able to be more cost effective with your asset utilization. And finally, taking advantage of the Orlando market. By doing this, you will be able to serve new customers and be more profitable rather than sending a greater amount of empty loads north, and gain more revenue and be a more profitable company. So we're confident that we have developed and devised the best course of action for immediate profit growth for your company. However, as you move into the future and in the coming years and look to further diversify yourselves as a company, we've highlighted a few key future opportunities that we feel you should take advantage of. The first being LNG trains. Your company is already taking a leadership position in the use of liquefied natural gas. As you continue to move further into this opportunity, you will have the opportunity to save huge savings in fuel as well as reduce emissions. And seeing that many of the stakeholders that are interested in the East Coast routes, they value cleaner supply chains. And for that reason, we think that you need to look seriously into sustainability. And through that, we also recommend that you look at acquiring some LNG trucks in the future as well. Through that, you'll be able to further that corporate sustainability. Second, we have the future opportunity of the Panama Canal expansion. Now, the project is set to be complete in 2016, but as it currently sits, the Panama Canal, the maximum container ship size it holds is roughly 5,000 TEUs. After completion, it will hold more than double that at roughly 13,000 TEUs. Your company being the only rail provider of the southern Florida ports, you will be able to take great advantage of this more than any other company. And finally, we have Orlando exports. As the Orlando exports currently stand, there's a limited amount of goods moving out of Orlando. But we see the opportunity for you to capitalize on the 3 majorly growing fields, including high-tech, healthcare, and military. And by capitalizing on those, carrying more shipments for customers, driving more revenue, and being a more profitable company. So as you're all already aware, the task at hand has been widely considered to be impossible by many intermodal experts in the field. However, given the FEC's undeniable track record, we know that the FEC does not shy away from the word impossible. Anthony Robbins once said, "What can or cannot be done, what is perceived to be possible or impossible, is rarely a function of our true capability. It is more likely a function of our beliefs about who we are." Your company believes strongly in its identity, and in following our recommendation, you will be able to once again overcome and achieve the impossible. We'd like to thank you again for having us here this evening, and we thank you for your time. At this time, we'd like to open the floor for any questions you might have for us.
I have one question. Great job. If I'm a shipper and the box goes to Orlando in a 53, and then was your assumption that I would have a load to move up to Jacksonville? Or, I'm sorry, or even, yeah, up to Jacksonville in the furtherance? As you looked at your costs, I wasn't sure whether the cost was representative of what a shipper would be expecting to pay for the inbound load by itself. And when you added that second loaded movement, which creates some benefit for the network, where were those costs born? And as the shipper's looking at the trade-offs, how did that play into the equation?
So when you're looking at the costs of each movement, we structured our costs so that the shipper would bear the entirety of the cost, where movement from the 2 southern ports up through Cocoa Beach, and we didn't use any 53-foot domestic containers. In our recommendation, we recommend using the 40 or 45-foot ISO containers that come through on each route rather than transloading into the 53-foot domestic. But when you're on that trailer going back from your destination in Orlando and then back down to the ports of Miami, we have the shipper bearing that cost as well.
Right. So I'm really interested in the recommendation between the transload and the non-transload. When you looked at that fully loaded transload cost, from the shipper's perspective, the loaded container that was coming and being moved after the fact, after the unloading of the ocean,
Yes.
transloaded ocean freight, that was creating benefit for somebody and different from that load. So I believe it's in your costs, the cost of that second loaded move.
Okay.
You see
So,
what I'm asking?
yeah, you're asking about when that unloaded trailer comes back and then goes up to Jacksonville northbound.
Right.
So the costs of that were accounted for by doing the proportional decrease into, because we costed everything out per a 40-foot container
Right,
basis.
exactly.
But then we realized those savings in the halfway through Cocoa Beach to Jacksonville route. The cost it would normally take to take a full route all the way from the Miami port to Jacksonville, we did the proportional cost savings moving
So
north.
this loaded return here, loaded
Yes.
return, is $148, and it's in your total, right?
Yes, that's included.
So if that cost was not in your total because it was borne by another shipper who made that loaded move, would that change anything about how you think about this problem?
We don't think it would impact our recommendation because we believe that the total landed cost of this, including the reduction of lead time, adds more value than any potential gains by returning a carrier to the original shipper. Sorry, I missed that in your original question.
No, that's fine. That's great, thanks.
On table 3, you had the annual demand for 40-footers of 10,000 start in year 1, 2016. Where'd you get that number?
We used the, in our research of the port websites, we found a estimated market size for the Orlando area of about 500,000 TEUs. So we started with a marketing push and estimating initial demand, and through an assumption that we would grow over the years through marketing campaigns and increased customer service.
So that start. So there's. I'm on table 3. I'm looking at percent of Orlando market, 4%.
Yes,
That was just a.
that was through research and assumption.
And then you made an assumption.
Yes.
Yes, sir. On that same table, the 1.2 million that you're going to spend on tractors
Yes.
equates to 10. I assume you've figured out a modeling on how many loads per tractor you're going to need. What's your thoughts on that?
So if you see we have that annual demand, which is the 10,000 in year 1, then we broke that down to a daily demand, activating, as it states on the FEC website, with their current rail schedule operating 5 days a week for the entire year. So 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year creates the daily demand. And then we calculated that each trailer could do a drop-off 4 times a day, and then pick up a different trailer that had been unloaded within the 2-day detention period that was allowed before that.
So in essence, 2 round trips, Cocoa to Orlando twice a day.
So the trailer would be going Cocoa to Orlando 4 times a day, actually.
4 times a day.
Yeah.
And then you're buying more tractors as you're going out.
Yes, incrementally, if you look at table 3, we have additional tractors coming in, and we assumed the maintenance costs for those would be included in the 85% margin.
And you assume diesel through the whole project. You don't convert at any point to an LNG.
No, we looked at the recommendation for that, but the upfront costs are a little more expensive for those, around $200,000 instead of the $120,000.
And also there's a current lack of infrastructure for the LNG along highways. So currently it's not publicly supported to be able to be cost effective with LNG. So until that improves, yeah, our recommendation essentially is that in the future, as that infrastructure grows, then we want to shift more towards the LNG usage.
Good.
Good job, guys.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.